I kept solving my own problems. And by solving my own problems, I realized everybody else has similar problems, and I could use those solutions in order to solve their problems as well.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Local Marketing Lab, where you get real-world insights from industry pros to help you drive local revenue and local growth. This podcast is brought to you by Evocalize, digital marketing tools powered by local data that automatically work where and when your locations need it most. Learn more at evocalize.com. What's up? Welcome to the Local Marketing Lab. Joining us in the lab today is a guest with over 20 years in the tech space across multiple verticals, including restaurant. He loves driving fast and taking chances. He's the founder of multiple organizations, including the Vivant Corporation, Utiliko Corporation, as well as Milagro Corporation, and is the CEO at all those entities as well. We are speaking with Hamed Mazrouei. Thank you for joining us in the lab, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on board.
You bet. You bet. Yeah, your background's really interesting. I love that it's across multiple verticals, and you've got a history of kind of starts and stops and figuring out what works best and failing forward and ultimately succeeding like in many different industries. So I don't know if you want to just give us a quick high level of your journey and what got you to where you are today. That would be awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll give you a short story of it, but funny enough, I put a LinkedIn post, I don't know, about a month ago that my last position was at Best Buy. So I actually took a pay decrease to go work at Best Buy for $8.94 an hour.
Oh, wow.
Back in 2002-03. So the tides have absolutely turned, but I got fired out of there for a bogus reason. And then that was my last job per se. I remember I was crying in the car, and the same manager who had hired me came out and was like, "Hey, dude, it'll be okay. You'll figure it out." And sure enough, figured it out. Got into surveillance, and then customers started asking, "Hey, if you do our video surveillance, you should do our alarms, cameras, audio, video, things like that." And then that was the beginning of the first company in 2003. And then things just kind of started morphing into customer demands and letting them sort of drive and see what makes sense to add on. From there, we started getting more and more into a restaurant space. Hired somebody who had done business with the guys at Genghis Grill. That was the really beginning of everything. So I remember when I built our first software was a customer. Actually, the first one was an employee theft prevention tool where it proactively went through all the transactions, and any exceptions, it would automatically grab that check and then email it to the manager. That was game changing. And I don't know if there is a solution out there right now that does anything like that. But anyway, that was the beginning of the software stuff. And then from there, it went into customer feedback, and then went into Vivant, our telecom company. And then we had shut down Improving Restaurants, which was the predecessor to Milagro. We were way too early to the game. We were talking about, back then there was no AI. So we were talking about CI, customer intelligence, because there was business intelligence, but not really any customer intelligence in 2010. So we were way too early to the game to try to solve the problem that we're solving today, some decade later, 12 years later. But after shutting that down in 2019, I always had that itch that, hey, someone has to step up and solve this problem. But because it's so complex and so difficult to solve, it's going to take a ton of money. It takes a ton of resources, and it really takes a unique set of individuals to actually take on the challenge and solve it. So I pitched it for several years to everybody. Hey, like, you should do this. In fact, there was a group of C-levels that had sold the company for a pretty good sum of money. And when I approached them, they said impossible to build, impossible to fund, and impossible to operate once it's built, because We do one part of this, we focus on just the feedback part, and that alone has been a challenge. So let
Mm-hmm.
alone building a complex platform like this. But that's kind of how the story morphed into what it is today. And again, where I kept solving my own problems, and by solving my own problems, I realized everybody else has similar problems, and I could use those solutions in order to solve their problems as well.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, your solution is really robust. Like you say, certain companies focus, there's entire companies that focus on just one aspect of what your solution provides. So it's really interesting to see how you guys do a lot of things really well and tie it together really effectively to create like a one-stop shop, for many different aspects of managing your business. From the marketing side, though, because this podcast we typically focus on the local marketing aspect. What are some you've gotten lots of visibility into seeing how your clients market to their guests, as well as you've seen impact and results of their efforts. So I'm curious, from your experience, what you've seen, what do you feel like moves the needle most from a local marketing perspective?
Really, it's basics. You got to think about it. So let's take a couple of steps back. Restaurants, everybody says they have thin margins, they have high labor costs, and they have high food costs, COGS. So why is that? For me, I learned this through my own company, through my own experience. Up until we were under 1 million a year in revenue, things were really tough. But once we started going over 1 million and substantially growing beyond 1 million a year, everything magically started working out. Like, we didn't have any thin margin problems. We didn't have any labor issues. And again, things just kind of worked out. Now, bring that into the restaurant industry. An average restaurant is doing it was 650 in 2021. And I believe 2022, it was like 750,000 a year in revenue. Where
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what business you're in, even if you own a lawn company, at 750,000, it's really hard to pay rent, fix expenses, employees, and still make 100,000 a year in compensation for the owner, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we started looking at it from that point of view. Why do restaurants complain of these three major problems? And it always came back down to one thing: lack of top line revenue. A restaurant that's doing 4 or 5 million in revenue is not complaining to have thin margins. They're not complaining of labor issues. They can actually afford to give employees a week of PTO and put in benefits and do all the things that a normal business restaurant can't. So we started looking at it from a business perspective. How do we resolve these issues? It's like, all right, increase top line revenue. Okay, how do we do that? Then I started digging in, and I had my team look for customer acquisition versus retention within the restaurant space, and they landed on a study by NRA and then a couple of other studies, because the numbers were so outrageous, I could not believe them. But it
Mm.
was 70% of customers in the restaurant industry don't go back to that restaurant. They visit just one time. That's 70% of the customers. So we thought that is absurd. Started digging in, found another study, and it's at 60%. And by then, we already had some customers that were on our platform for about 14, 15, 16 months. So we started going back to our CDP platform and looked at the data. How many of those customers are actually going back, and how many have been for just one-time visits? And it was anywhere from 69 to, I believe, 71%. So pretty darn accurate. Now the question is, how do you solve for that? So now you know the problem. You're not making enough money. Then how do you make more money? Well, acquisition is a great channel to bring customers in. But if you don't retain the customers, which is where the underlying problem is, then you're not going to get anywhere. And if you look at it from us, like, I have customers who's been with me since 2003, right? They've been
Mm.
paying for services since 2003. And some have been paying monthly services since 2003, right? So what does that mean? Acquisition for us is difficult, but retention is done. Like, we don't have a retention problem. You come into the restaurant space, retention is a major problem. And to come back to your question, how and what helps resolve these issues with retention? Basic communication. When was the last time that your favorite restaurant sent you an email and it said, happy birthday, or hey, thanks for coming by today, or hey, we haven't seen you in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. You normally come in once a week. Is everything okay, right? The basics of communication is completely missed within the restaurant industry. Now, obviously, there's a lot of reasons why: lack of proper technology, a series of siloed technology. You've got 15 different tech companies in a single restaurant just to help them operate that restaurant. Like, to me, that's absurd. We built Utiliko. By the way, we use Utiliko day in, day out. Without Utiliko, I would essentially shut all my companies down, because I just simply cannot operate with 10 different vendors. I've been there myself personally. It's impossible to manage a company when you've got 10, 12, 15 different tech companies, a CRM and accounting, a POS and online, or like all these different tools, just simply to keep the doors open. And that leads to lack of customer data, which then leads to not being able to effectively communicate with your customer. So I think restaurants are amazing businesses to own. They have really good margins. They're amazing and scalable businesses to own and operate. Outside of tech, obviously, tech is a game changer because you could scale overnight, no problems. But outside of that, I think restaurants are amazing businesses to operate. Now, how do you solve that? Again, just put the basics in place and talk to the customers. And sometimes you do have to make some adjustments to your SOPs, to your operation. And I was reading an article, for example, this coffee joint that is drive-through only. The first question they ask is, what is your phone number? And they put in your phone number, and they have like a 90% penetration rate. And by the way, so 90% of the customers are given phone numbers out. Why? Because they're asking. That's it. 10% says, hey, I don't want to give you my phone number. Great, no problem. What can I get you, right? So what are they doing? Now, the number one problem is, how do I communicate with my customer? So if you have their email or phone number, specifically text messaging is just going to crush it. So imagine, like, this is an example that we are doing today. We're not focusing on, we're an all-in-one platform. For us, the complexity of running siloed, best-in-breed products is just, it's unimaginable why a CEO would make that decision. So in fact, we run a podcast, and in one of our podcasts, I brought this point up, and I said, if I was a CEO of any restaurant brand, I would walk into my CTO's office and say, okay, great, you're our CTO. What tools do we have in place to run it? All right, we've got these 10 tools. We're paying a premium for every single one. They're the best of breed. You can't get any better than that. Agreed? Yes. Okay. How much of the functionality are we using? I promise you it's not going to be more than 20%. There's just no way. And then I would take the information from my CTO. Then I would start a road trip to every single one of my locations and ask every single manager, hey, you've got this best in breed POS, online ordering, gift card, loyalty, How much of it are you using on a daily basis? The manager on site is not going to care about, they're only going to need what they need to get their job done. Everything else has to be automated. You can't just buy all these expensive technologies that are siloed, that you have to Frankenstein together into hopefully some sort of a single entry point for the customer, and then expect it to work really well. And then it ends up defeating the purpose of the tools. So again, I always refer to this, and it's like buying a Lamborghini and giving it to a student driver. It just does not work. I mean, you're buying a Lamborghini, you're paying for it, but you're giving it to a general manager who just simply doesn't have the time. They've already got a million responsibilities. They can't do that. So again, loyalty also is not the key. So you get the customer information. 3 hours later in our system, the customer gets a simple text message. Hey, Justin, you came in today. Thanks for visiting. How was everything? One simple question, right? Everything was horrible, right? Then that gets escalated to the manager.
Yeah.
But if they said everything was amazing, it's like, great. Can you leave us a 5-star review on Google or Yelp? You choose, right? So now I'm actually proactively involved. And then if the repeat visit of the customer, if they come in once every month, 15 days later they get a reminder. It's like, hey, just here's a link to make another reservation, right? Or if they come in every 3 months, then a month and a half into it, they get that message. So again, it's just, for us, it's not about being the best in breed. Is how do we accomplish what the store needs? That's critical. You have to do everything that they need in order for the tools to be continuously used. And then how do you automate everything else beyond that in order to get that customer to come back? That's simple.
Yeah. And also, if we do take another step back, creating the right experience for folks when they come into the store. Like you talk about getting the feedback, that's an incredible tool to be able to know or gauge the experience they're having. But too many times folks will just continue to spend money on marketing without fixing the experience, which is what causes those folks to only come one time. If that incredible experience, they were treated very well, treated kindly, treated like they were extremely welcome there, they had awesome food, and a great experience while they were there, then they're going to come back. And then you can take those dollars, segment your audience to those who have been there, like you're talking about, market to them with your marketing dollars, and continue to drive repeat business from those folks. So now your money is not only going to acquisition for one-time visits, but it's split between a couple different acquisition as well as retention marketing. And you're able to, nurture many different segments of folks based on their engagement or their experience with your brand.
Agreed 100%. But for us, like, obviously, if you start a restaurant business, then that's given. Food and service has to be amazing. If it's not, then good luck in a way, right? Like those are non-negotiables. Like you can't, like, again, that's not our job to like, for us, that's the basics that has to be right, because you're absolutely right. Like, let me give you an example. Like, these are examples that you could actually, so I have a couple of examples. One that I just recently happened at NRA, and then one here, there's a restaurant near my house. They've got like 20 or so, more than 20 locations, but they do pretty well. And food is amazing. Service is always amazing. Like, those are given. They're good. They're really good operators. However, I've been going there off and on for a few years. I have never, ever had gotten any form of communication from them. Zero. I know they have my mobile number in their waitlist app, right? And then we approached them to do business with them. So we got some insights on average check size, for example. So it's like $67 average spend. Every time I'm in there, I'm spending twice as much. So now what does that mean? That means I'm twice as profitable as their average customer. That also means I tip twice as much, because 20% of $150, $60 is more than 20% of $67, right? So, and then they've got my contact information. Now, when I walk in, they put me on a wait list and I wait 45 minutes in line. And the last 2 times, it just was, I was like, I refuse to wait 45 minutes in line and spend twice as much and give you twice the profitability of every other customer. I would go somewhere else. Why wait, right? Versus I walk in, give them my mobile number. Again, these are the problem. Again, when I say we solve our own problems, like, I'm solving my own issues, which then imagine if you scale that to every other customer. What I want when I walk into that restaurant, it's my favorite brand. So now I say it's my favorite brand. I haven't been there in probably 8 months. And the last 2 times I went there, I waited in line for 10, 15 minutes and I was like, you know what, I'm out. However, imagine if I walked in there, gave them my mobile number, they put in my phone number, and they said, Hamed, we have a 45-minute wait because we're busy, obviously, as you can see. However, considering you're a VIP customer, quote unquote, meaning you
Mm-hmm.
spend twice as much, tip twice as much, give me about
Mm-hmm.
3 minutes and I'll have you seated at the next table. And I'm going to bump the next guy down the list, right? And by the way,
Mm.
this happens every day now, today. Go to a hotel, check in. If you're a Bonvoy Platinum member versus a nobody, you get treated differently, right? You get upgrades, you get this, you get that. Or even simpler, you want to talk about a waitlist site, look at airlines. Everybody with priority boards first. Why can't we do that in a restaurant? Why can't I get bumped up because I'm more profitable? So now let's come back to the negative aspect of that. What is this restaurant actually telling me? They're telling me that they don't care about me, that if I go or don't go, it's indifferent to them. Now they're pushing me, the highly profitable customer, which spends
Mm-hmm.
twice as much, tips twice as much, is twice as profitable as every other customer. They're pushing me to go to their competitors, which is what I'm doing because we have to eat anyway, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now the competitor gets me, they treat me better, they treat me like a VIP. And guess what they end up with? They end up with average customers. Average
Mm-hmm.
customers, average profitability, they leave average tips, and they spend average amounts. So now you end up in that, well, we have thin margins, we have high labor costs, we have high food costs, and it's a vicious cycle down. All you
Mm.
had to do is just simply recognize. By the way, did I ever mention discounting it? No. I'm already happy paying a premium. In fact, I was talking to another friend of mine, and he runs a medical facility, and he said, hey, like, I've done this heart scan and like all this stuff. And I was like, hey, get me in there. And he's like, oh, perfect, I'll get you in, I'll get you scheduled, and I'll comp it. I'm like, don't comp it. The fact that I don't have to do anything, I just show up there and I get it done and I leave, that's more than what I can ask for. Just get me that VIP treatment so I don't have to call somebody, I don't have to schedule it, I don't have to do anything. I just want to show up, get it done, and get out. And that's exactly what happened.
No, that's a
So
great example.
it's not always discounting, it's just recognition, the VIP treatment. And in the restaurant, it's so easy to do that. You just have to do it.
Yeah, you just have to do it. That's right. Yeah, a lot of times folks have, like you talked about, many different solutions. The only 20-ish% utilization of different tools. Like they've got all this data. There's a huge push for the last couple of years to data, bring in all this data, but nobody does anything with it. So if you don't have anyone on site or a team trained to actually know how to leverage the data, is it even worth, capturing, collecting, spending money on all these tools if you're not going to really use them, you know?
I
Um,
agree.
who do you have an example of someone, maybe one of your clients that is doing things really well that you want to give a shout out to?
I don't think we have anybody yet that is really fully using the entire platform to its max capacity. We've got one that's onboarding that we made a deal with. It's like, hey, we're going to run support, we're going to run marketing. Just let us handle it. That's our department. It's our responsibility. Anything goes wrong, it's our problem. We'll fix it. We'll figure it out. So I'm excited for this one. And by the way, I spend a lot of time with our customers. So I'm pretty hands on. I
Mm,
want to ensure that because I essentially built the entire platform. So I know the inside and out. I know what it's capable of, what it can't do. And I take that feedback directly and we improve the system day in, day out, just by being on site, being involved in these different things. So I'm super excited on this opportunity because they're already doing several million per building,
oh,
and
good.
the upside should be like they're already profitable, but they could be way more profitable just by simply doing some of the basics. And then we're going to start truly measuring that and build a huge case study because these are doing like 45 million per building. And there's already, I believe, nine. up and running. So that'd be exciting. But yeah, I still, even within our customer platform, like some are, again, I don't know, we're having these discussions, but sometimes it feels like they haven't fully grasped the idea of, if I start doing X, Y, and Z, then the result, I'm going to be completely different than my competitors. And again, some of it does require some operation change as well, but that's the key. Like actually, and the other example is, we went to, shout out to these guys at Steak 48. So I was at NRA. We went there night one. There was 4 of us, dined in. There were some mistakes that were made on the order, everything, and they gave us some free desserts, etc., to make up for it. And then the food was really good. It was just off the chart. They had this creamy corn thing that, and then they had they made it into like a creme brulee where they burned the sugar on top, and it was just freaking awesome. So the next night, it was just 2 of us, me and my COO. And we're like, hey, why don't we just go back there anyway? And we swapped hotels. We went to the other side of the river. And we're like, yeah, let's go. So we went back. The hostess did not recognize us. Or if she did, she could care less, right? So that was kind of a bummer. But the moment we got seated, 3 people came by and it's like, oh, you guys are back again, right?
Oh,
and
awesome.
They just made us feel so special. So the biggest, if they had some way to get that experience started from the hostess, it would have been off the charts. However, the first person shows up, it's like, oh, you guys are back again, thanks for coming out. It's like, okay, great, amazing. Yeah, they recognized us, right? And then a manager came by and she's like, oh, you guys were here last night too, no? It's like, oh yeah, we were here, we were sitting over there, and we asked to be seated kind of like close to that glass table with the glass kitchen stuff. But and then the server shows up and obviously he recognized us, etc. But the thing is, like, the only 2 things I would improve at that restaurant is start that experience with the hostess. Imagine it was a hell of an experience on the first night. Who cares, right? I don't talk about the first night, right? I'm talking about the second night. What did they do? All they did is just recognize that we were there the night before. That was it. 2 things to improve. That experience really should start with the hostess, because when that phone number goes in, I made reservations both nights. They already knew who I am. They should have known that I was there the night before from the reservation, and the hostess should have started that conversation, right? It's like, hey, you're back again. Just that, right? And then the only other thing I would add, when they came by, they did not use my name. They could have said, hey, Hamed, you're back again tonight, right? There's a ton of studies around customers' first name. That's why Starbucks asks you, what is your name? Because they want to make that personal connection. So if the 2 managers, the 2 people that came by, had they just said, hey, Hamed, you're back again, they could have easily looked it up and just used that, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's not that difficult to pull off. It's just surprising that a lot of restaurants haven't pulled that off yet and make that personal experience. And by the way, look at me sharing the story of the second night, right? So basic things like that it'll completely change the environment, and just making that customer feel like they're VIP, making them feel special. And by the way, the first night they discounted because the orders were not done correctly, etc. But the second night, we paid full price.
Yeah.
So there was no discounts.
Yeah, and it was an even better experience. Yeah, I've seen that in hotels. You'll go in, I think Marriott does it, where you walk in the room and it's like, hi, Justin, or hi, Hamed, on the TV. And, it walks, it's like, oh man, you feel like you're very special and you are VIP. Very cool. Those are incredible examples. I feel like we could go on for hours, but I feel like our listeners might not stay with us. So I did want to switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
I know that I've heard that, you love driving fast. I mentioned earlier, you drive fast, take chances. So you told me when we were at NRA, I chatted with you for quite a while, and you told me about a time when you'd gotten in a motorcycle accident. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was a crazy story. I have this crazy buddy of mine who comes up with these off the chart idea. So back in 2000, I think it was like 14, 15. He loves fast cars. In fact, he was the first guy that I ever drove in a supercar with him back in the day, and he had always inspired me. He was doing stock tradings and he was doing really well, so I always looked up to him. Always loved hanging out with him, etc. So we did a lot of traveling across the world together and just doing these crazy hikes, like 3.5 hours at like 2 o'clock in the morning till six in the morning, just to reach the top of them. Anyway, it was just crazy stuff. So one day he says, hey, let's get a bike, off-road bike, and let's go to Chile and come back. And I'm like, okay, great, let's do it. And I'm the type of guy that's like, all right, I'm up for anything and everything. So you tell me anything adventurous, I'm all in. Obviously, I mitigate risk, but I didn't do the homework. He normally does a pretty good job of doing the homework. And so we went out, we bought 2 motorcycles, we bought the entire gears, everything, brought it home. And my dad he wasn't happy, but he said nothing. I remember the day that I had an F-150, put the bikes in the back, brought them home. And he just looks at me and he just kind of quiet and he's like, oh man, I know what's going to happen. And I had no experience riding motorcycles, like at all. Like, then I went to classes, etc. But then we started planning it out, and it's like, oh my God, it's going to take us like a month and a half to go and come back. And it's like, no way that's going to happen. So we packed up and started doing local trips here in the US. And we were in Colorado, and we bought these BMW G650s, and they're thumpers, so they're single cylinder right underneath the seat. And then these guys, so we bought the entry level because we wanted to kind of train. And then the goal was to go to South Africa and buy these R1200 GS motorcycles, which are built for the desert and built for off-road. So we ran across some of these guys in Colorado, and it was still snowy, everything. They were off-road. So we started following them. And at one point, we got onto the main road, and we were probably going 100 miles an hour following these guys. And I was all the way in the back, and the road was beautiful. There was this river on my right, mountains on my left, and I started making this left turn. And for just a split second, I had some flashback memories. And at that time, my dad wasn't here anymore. So it just kind of for, again, a split second. And then and I was leaning to turn left. And by the time I snapped out, I felt I was leaning way too hard into the turn, and I couldn't lean anymore because I feared that I would just crash. So what I did is I stood the bike straight, slammed the brakes, went off the asphalt into gravel. And the moment I hit the gravel, the front wheel just kind of completely lost it. And the bike just started tumbling for probably about 150 feet, and it just went right down into the river. And I just kind of skidded all the way, probably for that 100 feet or so. And then I had my Bluetooth headset. I was talking to my buddy, and I just kept freaking hitting the thing saying, hey, I crashed. And the music was on, so he couldn't hear me. So finally, once everything was done, he came back, and it was just so lucky. And there was a lady and a guy in a Harley Davidson coming opposite of where we were going.
Yeah.
And when I stood up, she just grabbed me and she hugged me so hard. And I was hugging her like my life depended on her. And she said, I saw you. You are so lucky to be alive. And that was
wild.
So
that's wild. I didn't hear all those details with falling in the river and stuff. That it's so crazy.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, bikes, they're fun, but I've also heard that you've got a Lambo and you like to drive fast in the street. So what I thought would be cool is to leverage AI and drop you straight into a scene within Fast and Furious.
Oh, how funny. That's amazing. I love it.
What is hysterical is I could not get AI to give like hair similar to yours. I was like typing in all things, even Bob Ross hair.
Yeah.
And it would not come up with it.
That's crazy.
Anyways,
I love it.
going up against Vin Diesel there, Dominic Toretto. So
yeah, that's a great movie too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're fun. I'll shoot that over to you. But before we jump off, how can our listeners follow you, follow Milagro, or any of your other brands?
Yeah, anywhere on social media, we're all over the place. We're trying to get the word out. We want to try to help every restaurant. So if there's any thought leaders, if any visionaries are listening, we love to talk to you guys, and I'd love to sit down and have a chat. And again, these crazy ideas can come to fruition and can come to life. And the idea is, how do we help change the industry to not have thin margins, not have labor challenges? And again, the solution is easy. I do that every day in my business. If anybody comes up to me and says, hey, I'll save you $500,000 versus somebody else coming in and says, hey, I'll add 5 million in revenue, I'm always going to go with the revenue, because in business, I promise you, money solves 100% of your problems. Let me repeat that. Money solves all your problems in business, no matter what it is. So increasing top line revenue will allow you to do things that will completely set you apart from your competitors. And it's not that difficult. You got to focus on guest retention. So again, if you're a thought leader, if you're a visionary, love to speak with you and explore how else we can push the boundaries.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, it was a ton of fun having you in the lab. Thanks again for joining us, Hamed.
Absolutely. Thanks, Justin.
As always, thanks for joining us in the Local Marketing Lab. This podcast is brought to you by Evocalize. To learn how Evocalize can help you grow your business, visit evocalize.com. If you learned something new from today's episode, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook at Evocalize. That's EVOCALIZE. And on X at Evocalize Inc. And remember, keep innovating and trying new things. You never know what's going to connect with your audience until you try. And until next time, thanks for listening.